No, but there's another switch that feeds Granicus. I don't think it has anything to do with it though. But, okay. Well, there ought to be a ton of jobs over in City Hall. I mean, if he doesn't punch him in the throat.
President, keep track of who's next.
Okay, I think we're going to begin the meeting.
You'll say that if you request to speak, you'll sit down in the corner. You'll say you just queue up. And then,
Yeah, it's going to take me a second.
Okay, commissioners, are we ready to begin?
Yes.
So I think this is our fourth meeting, and I think you all have a copy of the agenda. Actually, I wanted to begin by congratulating all of those members of the commission who were recently reelected. That you managed to survive the madness or the democracy, or however you want to characterize it, over the last several months. On the agenda, the first thing up is just to review the committee assignments. I think you all got a copy of that. And it appears that with everybody's first choice, that there's a good representation and adequate numbers in all three of the groups, the committees. And anybody have any thoughts or concerns about the compositions? You've seen it. Anybody want to make any changes in their own selections, or make any other have any other thoughts about the what your fellow commissioners have selected? Yes. Everybody should have an agenda. It was on the table. It's on the other side.
It's trying, but unless he broadcast live.
Before we get started, I mean, or while we're starting, who is online and like who is actually here and who is not here today for the meeting?
Okay, let's take the roll, if you will. Let's start in the room.
So do you want her to just
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah. Jason Nemes?
Here.
Earl Jones?
Here.
Julie Adams? Here. Ja'Cory Arthur?
Present.
Maureen Butler?
Here, I'm virtually.
Awesome. So we have names Sean Dreisbach, Ken Fleming,
I'm here remotely as well.
David James,
Here.
Bonnie Jung, Mike Nemes, is that how you pronounced it? Nemes? Okay. Anthony Piagentini.
how'd you get that one right? Because he says it all the time.
Scott Schoenberger,
Present.
Shelby Somerville, and Pamela Stevenson. Okay. Yeah. We're all good? Red and full.
Okay, so back to the question that I asked. Anybody have any concerns about the list or your place, whether you got your selection? It's on, was it not distributed? It was sent to you by email, I know that.
I just have the agenda. I don't have the list.
Okay. It was sent out by email earlier this week, yes. Well, I'll read them off to you. So the three committees. The first, taxes. The first choice selections were the following: David James, Mike Nemus, Ken Fleming, Marion Butler, Shelby Somerville. On the GAPS group, Schott Schoenberger, Julie Rocky Adams, Pamela Stevenson. On services, Sean Driesbach, Bali Young, Jacori Arthur, Anthony Piagentini, and Gerald Neal.
I have a question.
Yes.
We can only serve on one committee, is that correct? Oh, thank you.
Well, I don't think we had that as a rule. The thought was that we would make certain that we had adequate members on each of the committees, and that you would select your preferences to make sure that, if possible, your first choices could be accommodated. If not, you'd have to drop down to second. But that's not an issue here. But the question you asked, Mr. Neal, was not addressed. Do you want to raise that issue?
Yeah, I did get my first choice, I believe.
You did.
That's the issues, I believe. But I really wanted also to serve on the Tax Powers Committee, if that's possible. I don't know what the rules are.
Well, we don't really have any. I guess we can discuss that. I mean, do you have any thoughts about that? Not really.
Jason Nemus, I think the committees are pretty balanced, and it just happened by coincidence that they are. What I would suggest, Senator Neal, if we could, is let's have everybody serve on one, and then obviously invite the participation for anybody on 2 or 3 if they would like to. I think maybe, so then we can be nimble, do the work, and then if you want to come and contribute, that's not going to be in any way shunned. That would be my view.
Well, there's no distinction between the two? Or is there a distinction? That's what I'm trying to find out.
In terms of what?
Well, I said, could I serve on 2? And then he made some comment about you can participate and what you suggest won't be shunned. Does that mean you don't have a vote on the committee? I don't know how it's going to work, see? So that's why I wanted to, and I didn't see any particular rules. That's why I wanted to serve on it as well.
My suggestion is to show up and contribute, but you wouldn't have a vote. If we're going to do that, I think my fear is that everybody would show up to all of them.
So are you saying that I cannot serve on 2 committees? Is that what you're saying?
That's my suggestion, but I don't know that,
I understand you
there's
suggest.
no ruling, obviously.
I'm just wanting somebody to tell me I can or cannot.
I think the thought, Senator Neal, was that everybody would serve on a committee. Now, but I think to Co-Chair Nemus's point, that doesn't prevent people from attending any of them and contributing. On the question of a vote, frankly, I hadn't considered that. I don't know whether the co-chair had either. If that's an issue that you want to get resolved firmly, you can either take the suggestions from the chair, or we can take a vote.
I probably sound difficult. It's not necessary for a vote. I'm just asking simply
Yes, I understand.
what the rules are, and I've expressed my desire, and if somebody says no, I'm fine. I'm not going to roll over. I'm just saying that's what my desire is.
Well, at the end of the day, you know, we don't really have a lot of rules or procedures in this commission. Maybe that's an oversight, but I guess we were expecting that we would be able to accommodate each other as we go through this process. And I would assume that in that spirit, that any committee you might attend would certainly be mindful to your suggestions. And I guess I can't imagine somebody making a big stink over how the recommendations coming out of the committee might be.
I don't want to be difficult, so this will be my last comment. I got the gist of this. But serving in the capacities that I do, you know, how you lock yourself in the beginning pretty much is where you're going to end up at the end. You don't know how it's going to be, and that's what I wanted to do. But that's okay. I'll serve on the Issues Committee, and I'll participate in the Tax Powers Committee. Thank you for your indulgence.
Okay. I think Commissioner Arthur has
I don't get it
a point. Sorry.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up on the question that the senator raised about whether or not we would be voting on these committees. I think it's implied, but could we just have clarity on that? You know, how do we come to decision making? Because that would be really important to understand before we make that decision on whether or not we can serve on different committees.
Well, I think that's a very valid point. It's something we need to discuss. And I think we should, my suggestion that we consider that in the context also of another issue we have to deal with, and that is the public input process. So one option to consider here is that the group would itself come up with recommendations in the areas that it's focusing on. I would imagine that if that means that they're going to have to vote on what those recommendations are, I would say the answer would be, that would make sense to me. If they had a different view on how they wanted to produce their results, I think that would be up to them.
And then a follow-up to that would be, I don't have the list in front of me. Maybe you could share who was supposed to send that or make sure that it does get sent. But do we know the number of people on each committee? Is it odd, even?
Sure. Let me just total that up quickly. On taxes, we have a total of 5. On gaps, we have a total of 3. And on services, we also have 5. Now, one thing on that the two co-chairs have been discussing is that we would participate on all 3. Now, that may throw your numbers off, but if that's an issue, we can discuss that.
Excuse me, just one point. Well, that's okay.
I'm still trying to, right, can I,
I think Mr. Piagentini, were you next?
you want to go?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I don't know how to use all this technology, but I'm kind of like Senator Neal. I'm trying to figure this out. I know that the purpose for the committees is so that it's kind of like how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, so that we kind of spread out the issues that we need to deal with relative to is merger working and who's it working for and who's it not working for. So I get the committee structure. I'm fully in support of it. I also get that the committees are going to put forward a recommendation for their specific issue areas. Here was my thought, is that as a group, we were going to vote on whether those recommendations were something that we wanted to move forward or not move forward, but that the committee process itself was, if you had a particular expertise, you could participate in that committee, but it was holistically going to be decided what we were going to put forward or not put forward. So help me understand what the issue would be about a member participating in multiple committees.
Right. That's a very fair question. I think what Jason and I have discussed is, and I think makes sense, but at the end of the day, it's a decision for the full body, is that the committees would produce recommendations.
Okay.
Those recommendations would form, if you will, the basis of what is being put out for the general public to consider. Okay. And at the end of that process, the recommendations from the committee and the input from the public, at the end of that process, the full recommendations are then made by the body as a whole back to the legislature.
Okay. And I get all that. I totally am in agreement with that. I think what your and the co-chair's vision is what my vision is. I guess I'm still just kind of confused about let's say that I want to show up to the tax committee one day. Can I open my mouth and say stuff at the tax committee, or do I kind of not get a say because I'm on the issues committee?
You know,
Because I have a big mouth, and sometimes I like to talk a lot.
well, let's discuss this for a moment.
Okay.
Before we answer that question, can we have a discussion about how shall the committee structure themselves, and what are your thoughts about how they should be managed? What's the procedure? Do you have chairs? What is the process for you all arranging yourself into a committee that'll produce a result?
I mean, this is Ken Fleming.
I think,
My-
Mr. Arthur,
Hold on, Ken.
we're either going to use one or two systems here. Oh, is that right? Okay, thank you. Yep. Please, Mr. Fleming.
Thank you. My thought is that each committee can have a coordinator to coordinate when they will meet, and also help flush out or find resources to.
Mr. Fleming, due to the open meetings laws, you, when you speak, you have to show yourself.
Oh,
If you're going to participate virtually, sorry.
no worries. Oh, I thought it was on and my thing was closed. Sorry about that. So the thought is to have a coordinator, of the committee to help coordinate the meetings, as well as the tapping into resources to get whatever information they need to help make the best decision possible. So that's the case, and I think that's the core group. Is it 3 or 5 in order to go through that? But I think, in terms of having, Senator Neal or Senator Adams participate, I think without a doubt there might be a particular issue that they can come from an experience to provide additional information in a meeting that we'll talk about. But the core group is basically folks that will be driving this. But anybody can. My thought is anybody can participate and provide input and provide information that they've experienced or they have seen, or whatever the case may be. That was my thought. I don't want to hate for us to get too structured or too bogged down with all these rules and so forth. We're trying to work this thing together in order to get the best product out there as possible. And I think what was laid out a few minutes ago in terms of going from now until the actual recommendation to the General Assembly is a good process in doing that. So that's my initial thoughts.
Okay. Mr. Arthur? Okay, got it. Mr. Piacentini?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So yeah, just to clarify, I think what I hear consensus around is each committee will appoint one coordinator. I think that's probably an appropriate term to use. Somebody's got to ensure that the meeting has minutes or some documentation related to it, some summary afterwards, plus make sure they're appointing a time and date. And then the second part is, as far as I think the point that Senator Neal was bringing up, I'll just say this is how we operate at Metro, and I think it's probably a good way to move forward. We have the designated committees. Anybody can attend any committee, so the committee coordinators, when you're setting a meeting, should alert the entirety of the group that you're having a meeting, so anybody could attend. Anybody that attends can speak and provide their opinion, but if there has to be a vote in the committee, only the committee members vote. So I think generally that's how we do things, at least that's how we've done things at Metro. It seems to be successful. Everybody can have their voice heard. The committee, if it's something that a committee is voting on, the committee members vote. And if it's something that, and then ultimately it will come to the full group for a vote. And that's where everybody can make sure they have the ability to vote yea or nay. So just my thoughts on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Neal.
Well, all due respect, it's not Metro Council, and this is more of a hybrid type of thing that we're proceeding with. And when I participate in something, particularly at this level, if we're moving together, I want to come in just like everybody else if I'm going to participate. And that's what prompted me, because I saw no rules. It's just a small amount of committees. And it seemed to me that as many people as possible that want to assert themselves on these various committees, the better it is in terms of enhancing this whole thing of moving forward together. Taxes is one of the areas that I have some expertise in, and I like to assert myself in that area, but services certainly is an area that I have expertise in, and I'd like to assert myself in that area. So that's why I raised it, and I'm sure that it'll come out at the end, but I don't see why we're over-structuring it in that fashion, quite frankly. When I participate, I want full participation, wherever I participate.
Other comments?
Mr. Jones, it's Mary Ann Butler. I don't have a problem if someone wants to serve on 2 committees and give up their time in that way. I think everyone on this commission has some history and some historical knowledge that might be useful. And if they want to serve on 2 committees, then have at it, and thank you for your time.
Other comments?
Yeah, if we ever make a vote.
Jason,
Amos? Yes.
Jason Amos, I think, serve on all 3, I think it's great, but I think you vote on 1. And the reason I think that is we actually got lucky. I mean, there's an elephant in the room, and that is that we need balance. There are things that are going to be tension on. We know that's going to happen. You look at the map of the voters, of the votes this last week, we know there's going to be a tension. And we were fortunate that everybody's first choices was exact balance for every one of these committees. And if people start showing up that interrupts the balance, then I think everyone will show up, and then why would we have the committees at all? And I know Senator Neal says he wants to be fully participatory in the taxes. I'm sure he will. His voice will be heard, both in the committee and when we meet as a committee of the whole. So I think if people are showing up and then voting on all 3 committees, if that's what we want to do, that's fine. But then I think we've just destroyed the committees, because if one side shows up, and there are sides, let's not just paper over that. If one side shows up, then the other side's going to show up too. Well, the way we have it now with 5-3-5, we were fortunate that they are balanced. Let's work together within that structure. If you want to show up, great. But the votes are balanced, and I think that's what we ought to do.
If I may, you raise an interesting point about sides. It depends on how you define sides. For instance, you come from a different perspective than I do politically and perhaps on various issues. But if I look at taxes, I see sides as it relates to the state level. So I don't see the balance there. So, and that's a very critical issue. In fact, all 3 of these issues are critical. And I think that I would take your argument by saying that it's not balanced in terms of the state input, our experience from the perspective that we serve in. And that's what I'm pushing. I'll shut up when you tell me to, but I tell you, I'm listening to this, and I don't see a problem. I don't think people are going to rush to jump in all these committees with respect to this. I'm just saying that I want to participate. I want to participate in a very aggressive way, in an informed way, and I want to input as much as I possibly can, but I also want my voice to be treated just like anybody else's.
Well, any other comments? Mr. Arthur.
Thank you so much. I'm curious if the co-chairs could just elaborate on the balance. I keep hearing this balanced. Are you just talking numerically? Are you speaking balance in some other way in terms of geography, local versus state? Could you just elaborate on what you mean by these committees are balanced?
Well,
Certainly.
I'll address the question first in terms of balance. From my perspective, I mean, I start this whole thing from the perspective of the statements made by the commissioners on our first meeting, which was everybody had the interest in common of making certain that we have a vital city of Louisville. And so from that perspective, I don't see sides. I see different points of view on different issues. But I would hope that there isn't a hard and fast side here that runs through each and every one of these committees, and that people have a view, who have a view, for example, on taxes, don't have the same, quote, division or side when it comes to something like gaps or whatever. So I'm not being in politics, I'm not understanding the sides issue in quite the way maybe that some of you all are. And I realize that you all bring to this discussion issues and experiences that I don't have. I look at that as a good thing, frankly, in this context. So I would like to hope that when I say that this makes sense to me, if I'm missing something, you all tell me, but if the response is that you're not recognizing that we're divided, that's right. I don't want to recognize that you're divided.
Can I answer that question, Mr. Coulter?
Please.
Thank you. And I want to associate myself with your comments. I think they're on point. But to answer the question directly, I mean, I look at things the way I see them in reality, and maybe I'm wrong. When I drafted this bill and put this committee together, I went overboard, I think. Not overboard, but I was meticulous in making sure that we had balance. We have 2 Democrats from City Council, 1 Republican. 2 Republicans from the House and 1 Democrat, because it was at that time a 75-25. Two Republicans from the Senate and 1 Democrat. And to make sure that we had further balance, because that was 2 dominant Republican bodies and 1 dominant Democrat body, a member from the mayor's office. And then we have a Democrat member that's in charge of that's the head of the League of Cities in Jefferson County. And then we went to the business community and let them decide those. And I don't know the partisan makeup of the business community. So the balance that I'm talking about is when I started the committee, I did that to try to be as fair as possible. Then when you look at these, I think, Councilman Arthur, they're balanced not only in terms of party, which is important. We can't overlook that. We're trying to come together because we all love our city, but they're balanced in terms of partisanship, but they're also balanced in terms of inner city versus suburbs. And we just got lucky because it could have been all suburban people on one committee and all inner city on the other, and that's not how it happened. And so I think that was a happy circumstance that is good. And I know I believe what's going to happen is if 2 suburban people show up in addition to whoever's already on the committee, then I think 2 of the other folks are going to make sure they show up to bring balance. And if we do that, then everybody's serving on the committees and the committees aren't useful. That's my thinking of balance. We all love Louisville, but we do have different views. And again, if you just look at the heat map of the election from the other night, which we're going to try to go through and do what's best for Louisville entirely, those differences of opinion, those differences are real. And I think we were lucky with the way that this came out of the committee makeup, and I think we should stick to it.
My last word, Mr. Chairman.
Please, sir.
I don't promise that. Then I want to serve on the tax committee and not the services committee.
Okay, we'll so note. Any other comments on the question of the composition of the committees? Okay, then we heard some suggestion from Mr. Fleming about the coordinator who'd be responsible for convening as well as corralling resources for any particular session. I think we also suggested, and I think I heard agreement from Senator Adams, that the output would then be proposed or, if you will, discussed with the general public at hearings that will be held, which is another item on the agenda. And then at the end of that process, the commission as a whole would then take the input from the committees as well as what was heard from the citizens, either in reaction to those proposals and or what they came up with on their own, to produce final recommendations to the legislature. So if that, if.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I apologize. Just put me back where I was
Yeah.
on the committee. I've just been convinced that it would be important for me to stay where I am on the.
You want to go back to
services. I'll stay at
services?
service.
Okay. Okay, so if I have described that correctly, I'd like would someone move that we proceed in that fashion, and then let's approve it or not? Can I-
I'll make that motion.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All those in favor, I guess we have to take the roll.
What's the motion? I'm not clear.
The motion is that we proceed as discussed with the committees.
Turns out the composition, you mean?
No, it's more than that, Senator. The composition of the committees, the designation of a coordinator responsible for convening and making sure there are adequate resources in front of the committee, as well as then responsible for pulling together the output, the recommendations. Then that information would be put to citizens of Jefferson County for their reaction. And then based upon the reaction of those citizens in the hearings, as well as the raw recommendations of the committees themselves, will all come back to the full commission for decision and recommendation, final recommendations to the legislature.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. Okay. 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 So let's do a voice vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that carries. That's our process going forward. Now, I thought that we should talk as well. Let's drop down to number 3 for the moment on the public input process. I know at various points we've discussed the issue of where those should be held. I think it'd be helpful if we could actually now begin to think about where those should be and sort of lock down the locations. And then I think we've now just agreed that at least part of that process would include the presentation of the recommendations by the committees. And I would imagine that there might be other occasions that either the committees themselves or this body as a whole might suggest that certain people appear as witnesses in these hearings. But otherwise, it's a question of listening to the public. If we proceed that way, can we talk about locations? And how many hearings do you all think are appropriate, and where should they be held?
We're talking about public hearings, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, correct. Ms. Young.
Obviously, I think with the fact that it's going to deal with all the counties, I know that we probably have some government centers that we can go to, southwest or southeast. My council room would hold 70 some people. That's kind of eastern. I'm sure that we can get places like the Jeffersonian, somewhere in the Fern Creek area. I think it's very, very vital that we take this to the people and not make it inconvenient for them to come to us. And if that means a lot of us doing a little extra advertisement about it, whether it be social media or whatever, I think it's all of our responsibilities to get as much input from the citizens as possible. So however meetings that you want to have, I believe that they should be spread out all over the county. It's just my suggestion.
Mr. Chairman, this is Ken Fleming. Just thinking, I think this is brought up before, but I think Bonnie was talking there. My thought is maybe have meetings that reflects or mirrors the school districts, and have it at a school at each one of those areas. That's what is it? That should cover. That's not a overburden number, but then again, it's not a under serving our obligation to get the input from the citizens. So that's my thought. Just to model it after the school districts and work with the JCPS and gets the school to host something there.
Any other comments? Piagentini.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Oh, it's on. Only that I don't know how they're configured in terms of balance and what that'd be based upon. I'm going back to the balance piece to understand what we're doing. Let me tell you why I'm being so meticulous at this point, because I think that it's going to be very important for us from the beginning to get it right. I agree with the idea of balance, by the way, and I think we should do that throughout. And we do that, I think it enhances our ability to work together going forward, you know. So I just want to know if we go to school district, which sounds good to me, but I don't know how that plays out in terms of balance. What do I mean by that? I mean the central issue, no matter what we say here today or don't say here, we're going to have to get to is what does this mean to those inside the current system, how it's being served, and what that means to people outside of the current system. And I'm talking about what we define as that area, the way those taxing pieces are set up. So we can, I'm not saying we can ignore that from the beginning, but I think we got to have balance all the way through. So I just don't, I agree with what Representative Nemeth said about that when I stopped and thought about it. So I don't know, how does that play if we do school districts, for instance? Maybe Ken could tell us.
Does anybody have any, know what the locations of, you say the school districts, does that?
I mean,
That's not a specific location. I mean, that's a geography, right? It's not a building or a place.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. That's basically, I'm just looking at geography coverage. You know, in terms of a school, you know, we can figure out what schools might be centrally located in that district, rather if it's an elementary school, middle school, or high school. You know, it really doesn't matter that what grade level it is. But I think, you know, I think the school districts, it's big enough but not too small that covers a pretty well area of the whole county. So, I mean, like I said, that's to me, it seems like an easy process to do that, and it covers everybody. And I don't want to use balance, but it does cover everybody on a broad spectrum.
Of course, we haven't discussed, any particular number. This proposal would involve, I guess, 7 locations. Did anybody have any comments, either geography-wise or numbers-wise? Yeah, Piagentini first, then I think President James. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what I'd say is historically, when we do what I'll call roadshow, bring to the people, and again, I'm not saying this is a Metro Council committee, but Metro Council is the only one that is strictly a Jefferson County group of all the people that are here. So when we've done that in the past, I know related to budget issues and things like that, we've done public meetings in different geographies. The minimum has always been 4. And typically that has been East End, South End, downtown, West End. And by downtown, draw a line from the actual central business district to like the Highlands, and probably cheat toward the Highlands a little bit. But those are the 4 areas that we've generally targeted. And there's a variety of venues in those areas that you could use. I'm fine with doing it by school district. I think Representative Fleming brings up a good idea. That brings us to 7 from 4. I wouldn't go much more than that. I think 7 is actually pushing a lot, frankly. The only thing I do want to be careful about, and I pulled up the current JCPS school district map on my computer. The way that map is written currently from their redistricting they did after the census, they have, other than one district, no, maybe two districts, the rest of them are a combination of urban service district and non-urban service district. So I think District 3, which is James Craig, which is in the northeastern corner of the county, and Sarah McIntosh District 7, which covers the east and southeast area, are the only two that have no interaction with the urban service district. The rest of them, District 1, I believe, is wholly in the urban service district. The rest extend most of them north-south, and some of them, sort of northwest, northwest, southeast. So they're in both areas. So depending on what school you pick, in some, Joe Marshall's district, for example, District 4, goes from Shively all the way down to the southwest corner of the entire county, almost in Fort Knox. So my point is, I'm fine with doing that, but we would need to even fine-tune it further so that we have a combination of areas that ensure the urban service district has an appropriate amount of representation of those meetings, and the non-urban service district areas also. So I would say 7 would be the most. If you want to follow that, that's fine. But I do think we would need to follow up quickly from here on what schools we're talking about. Because, for example, in District, I think District 3 still includes Eastern High School, but that's in the southern tip of that. I mean, depending on which high school you would pick, or which school you would pick, you could have almost all the meetings in the urban services district, or only 2, depending on, that's how large some of these districts are. So I think we need to fine tune it a little bit.
Let me give you another point. This is Ken Fleming again. Let me give you a point. I brought up the idea, the school is for a convenience factor, accessibility factor. And if you have, a school, close to the center or in the center, that'd be good. I'm just looking for accessibility, and it's hard if you have like 2 or 3 or 4, somebody might be in the far western area of a particular boundary, and it might be difficult for them to get to. I'm just looking for its convenience, and we can sit there and we can slice and dice what school it is. But like I said, I'm driving, my driving factor is accessibility, making sure that people have a really accessible place to go and provide their input. And 6 or 7, depending on the school district, that seemed to be a nice way to have that accessibility and convenience factor. That's all that was coming from.
Understood. Any other comments? Yes. President James?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with the conversation about making sure we're spread out across the entire county, and that we have accessibility. I would just bring in a technical issue. JCPS is not very open-minded to allowing people to be on their system, so that we can broadcast. I would suggest that we still do it by those districts. However, I would suggest that we use either libraries or other government metro-owned buildings that we actually control the backbone for that data portal.
Okay. Thank you. Well, look, this has been good discussion. I'm sorry? Again. Okay. We'd like to suggest then one of the 2 co-chairs get together with the inputs that we just heard, with the focus, frankly, on numbers, and then come back with due regard to the concerns about where locations might be in, let's call them mixed school districts, if you will, meaning urban service districts and suburban. So finding locations that are appropriate for the widest possible participation and convenience, and come back then with those recommendations in terms of the locations, the specific locations, and then also some suggestions as to the timing for the full commission to look at and approve in the next meeting. Yes.
Are we going to just bring back something here, or are we going to have a process where we can interact, for instance, with you, the co-chairs, and have input, and you can bring back something? What do you recommend?
Well, I mean, I certainly, if somebody has some thoughts about particular locations between now and then, that makes perfect sense. Just email both of us, Jason and I think we can deal with that.
I would request then that you solicit that just administratively,
Okay,
so that you make sure you get the input.
we'll do that.
Thank you.
Okay, the last item on the agenda, back now to number 2, was a discussion of the proposal that Dr. Coombs and Dr. Hoyt made regarding the analysis of the mostly services and the what works and what doesn't work, I guess is maybe a good shorthand. I know that Mr. Fleming and President James were in discussions with Mr. Coombs. Can you all just give us an update on where things stand regarding a proposal?
Sure. David James, Metro Council. I sent to, I think both of you all, and to Mr. Hoyt and Coons a proposal to modify what their proposal was that we voted on, which for me, in practical terms, I guess would be a motion to reconsider what we voted on, because I had more time to actually look at it. If you would give me the opportunity to talk through that document, does everybody, and I can have the document handed out to everybody, and if we could talk through that, if that's possible?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay.
If I can interject for a moment, this is Mary Ann. Before we go through that exercise, which I think is good, since I'm the mayor's designee on the committee, after the last meeting, I forwarded that proposal to the mayor's office to let them know what the commission was hoping in terms of gathering information and how to get it. They in turn asked the county attorney to weigh in on a few things. I believe the county attorney's opinion came back late yesterday and should be there for everyone. And one of the biggest things is because of the dollar amount, it will have to follow Kentucky Procurement Code. So that is something we'll have to do. There's
Well,
also,
Yeah.
there's, if you read the county attorney's opinion through there, it goes through that. There's also questions of, does LRC or does Metro have any staff that can help with some of the research? And is there an opportunity for any cost sharing throughout the process? Because this is an unbudgeted thing, and they're looking at that. But the biggest thing that the county attorney is concerned about is that it does need to follow Kentucky Procurement Code.
This is Ken Fleming. The Kentucky 45A Procurement Code, there are several ways you can procure a contract. That is, you can be a competitive bid, quality base, or sole source. Sole source basically means that there's very little, if actually there's not anybody out there that can provide a particular service or product in order to do this. And I would submit that this is very, very few. I don't think there's anybody could really pull together, the data and the information that we need to in order to do that. So that's fine. Yeah, that we can go through the model procurement code, but there are several ways that you can procure this. And one way is a sole source based on our understanding and what we believe that there's very little, if any at all, entities out there or individuals going to provide this type of service.
Mr. Chair, if I may. Thank you, Anthony Piagentini, Metro Council. So, yeah, I completely agree with Representative Fleming. The administration, the Fisher administration, literally every week or every other week sends multiple non-competitively sourced bids or procurements to Metro Council for their review. Our rules stipulate that anything over 50,000 in non-competitively bid has to come through Metro Council for approval, and we approve these literally every single council meeting, 'cause that's how often the administration does it. Now, most, if not all of them, are justified, and there's a justification requirement, and that needs to be publicly released and all that stuff. So, but yeah, in this case, I agree. I think this is one of those few circumstances where the history that, for example, Dr. Coombs has, and Metro ourselves have solicited his support in other initiatives outside of just his original work 20 years ago on this. And in every case, we have done a sole source contract with him. And there's not been any pushback by the public or anybody else on that, because the justification was very clear. So I agree that, we should always follow the law and procurement rules, but the procurement rules are very clear that we can do this in a sole source fashion if there's unique circumstances. And I firmly believe there are in this case. Thank you.
Could I ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
Please.
Does that means you still have to get the authority from Metro, I guess, Metro Council, but you don't have to competitively bid it? Is that what that means?
Yeah, I've got a follow-up question myself, because I understand you've addressed the question of whether or not it can be not competitively bid. The other issues, as I understood, and I haven't read this opinion yet, but in discussing the question of cost, is that a prohibition here, or is that just the idea that, in other words, if it's not budgeted, if it's a non-budgeted cost, is that a showstopper or just a caution, or what is it?
No, it is not. So first of all, both council and the mayor's office have certain latitude related to budget line items. We pass the budget that has large dollar amounts in large areas. And for example, we just found out that we have a $30 million surplus on that budget, and we're in the process of debating how to amend the current budget to do that. When we pass things like this, there's one of a couple ways to do it. You can just say, look, this is going to be billed against a certain line item in the budget, in which case there's nothing you have to do other than approve the non-competitively bid contract. If this was truly an egregious amount of money, something that, if this was $50 million or something crazy, that would actually put us in a situation where we could be literally over budget for the whole year, then we would need a budget amendment to follow, but that's not the case here. I would also let everybody know that it is customary in Metro rules that work can begin on a sole source contract. Work can begin once the mayor signs the contract. Coming through Metro Council is a required step, but it is extremely commonplace that work begins on those contracts while Metro Council is still debating it. Now, to be clear, from a legal point of view, that means that work, you could argue, is at risk, right? If the council doesn't approve the sole source contract and somebody's already conducted a certain amount of work, but even in the instances where council has pushed back, and this actually happened recently, we pushed back on a sole source contract, several months of work had already been conducted based on the signature of the mayor, we still approved the amount of work that person had already done so that there wasn't any breach of contract concerns that we could have been sued over. My point in simply giving all this context is with the administration's support, we can go ahead and get a sole source contract executed, begin the work, get that approved through Metro Council simultaneously so we can move with some sense of urgency. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Neal.
I'm a little energetic today. Please forgive me. Just two things. One is, are we under some pressure to get it approved through council? I don't see why we have to jump over any particular hoops. I mean, just by process, it looks, in terms of time, there's no urgency. unless I'm missing something. The other thing is, yeah, I'm sorry? Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I don't think there's a time problem as long as we're studious about getting through the hoops that we have to get through. I don't think that's an issue unless something I don't understand about the way Metro Council works. But the other piece is, we did given any consideration of the state? Have we reached out to the state for any funds, maybe a joint thing or something like that? Has that been considered? That'd take a little pressure off of Metro anyway. Just a question.
I don't know, this is Ken, I mean, Senator Neal, I mean, that question can be asked, and I think, Jason, that might have been discussed in the past, but, we can go through that process, but in order to do that, I guess we might have to, I don't know if you can open up the budget or not. I don't know. We'll have to figure that out. If that could be put under like local government, if they have any type of discretionary funds that they can use, that's already been allocated, based on the budget process that they can, use in order to, provide, some type of, partial, support. But that's something we can ask.
Okay. I would ask that you do so, or someone does so.
Mr. Arthur. Oh, I'm sorry, David James, my mistake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to follow up on a couple comments that were made. I think our only timing issue is the limits that we have based upon KRS that was passed, House Bill 314. As far as the timing of Metro Council, we have 3 meetings left for the year. So if something were to 2 meetings left, I'm sorry. So if something, we had the last one last night. So if something were to need to be placed before the Metro Council to be voted on before the end of the year, we would need to have that in hand by the next filing deadline, which I think is in a week from Monday. 2 weeks from Monday. So basically we have 2 weeks to generate that. And then the council doesn't meet to do business again until the end of January. So
2 weeks from this coming Monday?
yes. Yeah, our last meeting is in the middle of December. I think it's the 15th or 14th. And so those are the timing issues that we have.
Well, I'm just concerned on the question of what are the requirements to make a determination that this is a contract that meets the exception or the exemption from the requirement for competitive bidding. And I'm just perusing this opinion. I don't think it answers that question, but yes.
I just wanted to state, just for the record, Monday, November 28th at noon would be the filing deadline, just so we're all on the same page. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to add one other thing. Just for the use of the sole source contract is something that Metro Council, the administration, uses on a regular basis, every council meeting. And so I don't see that as being an inhibitor towards getting this accomplished. If for some reason the administration doesn't want to do this, there will be a new administration in 50 days.
So if I can ask you, Mr. President, does that mean then that if the commission makes a recommendation to the council to approve a contract and the council acts on it in accordance with the timetable you've laid out, that disposes of this issue unless and until somebody wants to challenge that in whatever form would be available to do so?
So the mayor would have to sign off on, so the council votes and we sign off on it, through the president, and then it goes across the street to the mayor's office. They sign off on it, and that's how it becomes real.
Thank you.
It could be veto-proof.
I want to see what's in the contract. I'm curious, what is the contract? There's a lot of red lines. Sorry? Yes. Right. Can we, so we'll take that one offline for a further discussion about the process. If I can ask, however, President James and Representative Fleming to take a look at the document in front of us. Can you walk us through this? And I think you had indicated, President James, that there were suggestions made here, or red lines made based upon your discussions and or your facts as you understood them, whatever?
That's correct. I just wanted, I looked at this and we came up with some changes, possible language changes, and I would like to go over that if you don't mind. So if you look on page 2 at the very top, it talks about plus an array of fees and other revenue sources such as parking, space rentals, and dividends from the water company, Louisville Water Company. And so for those that are not usually familiar with the way we craft legal language, we strike through the word in the middle of the word with those long lines so that you still know what the words are, but we're saying remove these words. And then when we put lines underneath the words, that's saying we're adding this language. And so you would strike through the language that was already there, and then it would pick up and say, at the time of merger, the city of Louisville wholly owned the Louisville Water Company. That $19 million dividend belongs to the U.S. Service USD, you call it the Urban Service District. And there are 83 municipalities in the county, including the overarching countywide Louisville Metro government. 4 of those municipalities, Jeffersontown, Prospect, St. Matthews, and Shively, are large enough to have their own police departments, as do some of the other smaller cities like Linden, Anchorage, and Indian Hills. However, the suburban cities with police departments need help from the county police department and LMPD to handle homicide crime scenes, meaning that LMPD often handles crime scenes for those smaller agencies. And all 4 of these cities, as well as West Butte, levy their own occupational tax rolls. So it shouldn't say county police there, it should say LMPD. Yeah. And then you skip down and it crosses out the other language, and it says, given the impact of COVID and COVID-related public policies, we will need to pay special attention to the reference time period for the study. Good data on government revenues and expenditures are available for fiscal year 2021 and in many cases fiscal year 2022. As researchers, we are always attempting to use the most recent reference period for which measures are available. However, one could argue that fiscal year 2019 was the last, quote, normal period of operations, meaning that was the last period before COVID changed everything. Only the last few months of fiscal year 2020, July 19th to June 2020, were affected by COVID. We will have to use our professional judgment as we go through the various categories to make sure that analysis and conclusions are representative of normal operations. And then the next change would be where it says police, allocate Metro police services to neighborhoods based on budget to division. Precincts are assumed to be evenly distributed across there, and then it scratches it out. And new language to be considered would be, however, we will need to account for the fact that metro government police are supporting suburban city police on a daily basis. Then the next section would cross that portion out, and it would add youth detention services is a related category that will be treated in a similar way. And then it talks about fire, allocate fire service using the district's address data on calls. And this includes the U.S. Urban Service District and all of the suburban fire districts, because the reason for that is that they often cross back and forth. EMS, and that crossing back and forth didn't really happen until, I think, Councilman Piagentini, can you help me with that? Was that maybe a year ago when they signed that agreement, year and a half ago?
That's about right, yes.
Okay,
Mr. President.
all right, thank you. And then this includes suburban fire district, most of which also make runs with EMS sometimes. And then you cross out the rest of that, and then add new language that says street cleaning, snow plowing, every household and business has garbage pickup. Metro government provides pickup for both regular garbage and recyclables inside the urban service district and snow plowing throughout the county. The state contracts with Metro for snow removal on state, non-interstate roads. The other municipalities offer similar services, though only Metro actually does so using public employees. Elsewhere, suburban cities, homeowners associations, and individuals contract with private garbage pickup services, with the price varying by place. Not all suburban cities or residents of unincorporated areas participate in recycling. There is wide variation in snow plowing protocols among suburban cities and homeowner associations, with some plowing a light snowfall, others waiting for accumulation. The expenses will be allocated geographically based on the jurisdiction of the residents. And as it relates to the health department, scratch out that first part there and say the core focus will be on patients of the county health department and the family health centers. Special care will need to be taken to account for the effects of COVID. Skip further down where it says libraries, and it would say cross out where it says under parentheses, the year picked will dramatically skew these numbers. And then skip down to where it says parks and recreation. You see where it says cut that particular language, and then further it says add the language of some of the larger suburban cities have their own parks, such as St. Matthews, Prospect, and Anchorage. Since all parks are available for use by anyone and there is no monitoring of individual uses, expenditures will be allocated based on the distribution of the population. And those were the suggested changes I wanted us to discuss. I know we're just receiving the document to talk about. People may have to look at it and study it to talk about it, but that was all I had, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Piagentini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do have just a couple quick comments, and then unfortunately I've got to go here in a minute. But on page 2, President James, you mentioned 4 of these municipalities. I'm referencing the, looks like third to last sentence, starts with 4 of those municipalities, parentheses, Jeffersontown, Prospect, St. Matthews, and Shively, and parentheses, are large enough to have their own police, as do some of the smaller cities, like we should add Middletown.
Right.
So Middletown, Linden, Anchorage, and Indian Hills, because they also are not one of the cities that does an occupational tax. So the rest is fine. They don't levy an additional occupational tax, but they are one of the, quote, smaller cities that has recently added a police department. Page 3, I just probably want some clarity under the police section. However, we need to account for the fact that Metro government police are supporting suburban city police on a daily basis. I would tell you the flip is happening also.
I agree.
So, yeah, not on homicides. I think you specifically cited homicides, and that's generally true. But I just had a recent example where Middletown Police were in Lake Forest, for example, which is not a part of Middletown, related to an emergency situation. So, but I don't think anything we have to tweak, but I just want to make sure it was contemplated that we're talking about it going both ways.
Absolutely. I think that's the intent.
Got it. And then under corrections, you mentioned youth detention services as a related category that will be treated in a similar way. Do we want to make any reference, because generally juvenile justice and youth detention, now we have our own transportation group, which generally this is how we refer to them as, or now we've called them youth transportation or something like that. But since juvenile justice technically is a state thing, do we need to make any change? I'm fine with keeping it the way it is, but.
I think maybe we may want to add that the transportation of the youth. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, maybe just something to think about.
Right.
Yeah, because I do want to make sure we, again, part of this is being super clear on jurisdiction, one of the things that we have a whole subcommittee on, but also related to state plus city, right?
Correct.
And then the last thing this is page 4 now, under Parks and Recreation. Do we want to make any reference to the parklands and waterfront? Because one of the most, just for everybody else's edification, 2 of the most widely used parks in our entire park system are 2 parks that have that the city doesn't have jurisdiction over, the parklands and then a waterfront park, which are kind of their own entities.
That's correct. I think we should, because they're actually the most popular.
Exactly. Yeah, they're heavily used, very popular. And so I think we should reference them with an acknowledgement that we don't have jurisdictional rights over them, but.
But we put money towards them,
Well, at least waterfront we do.
both of them.
Parklands as well?
Mm-hmm.
Very well.
There you go.
So, okay, thank you, Mr. President.
President James, did you take notes on those suggestions?
Yes, I did. And I will email them to both of you all.
So,
Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry.
Chairman.
Yes, please.
I just want to ask a process question. How would this document be treated and used? Is there another opportunity for input or not? Or just trying to get an idea of where it goes from here?
Well, what we'd hoped to do was to approve it tonight so that the analysis could start. As you heard before, we're on a time limit. It seems like a long time, but it's really, 10 months?
Yeah.
And so that was the hope, that we could get them started. Is there something that you...
No, I understand the urgency. Will there be opportunity, however, if we determine more, that we can open it back up to tweaking, or we're just going to approve it and run with it?
Well, now, I guess I should say as a lawyer, it is a contract, so theoretically, and maybe legally, it's a done deal once approved. Now,
Well,
I don't know whether or not...
depends on the language of the contract.
Sure.
This is Ken Fleming, Senator, and Chair Jones, he's an attorney. He knows contracts backwards and forwards. And my thought is that if there is something that comes up, either to increase or scale back the contract, you can always do an addendum, an amendment to that in order to make that happen. The chair is right, it's a done deal, but I think to be prudent, and I've done this on several occasions, you can always open up a contract or put an amendment to that that's mutually agreeable by both parties.
Or you can put language in that gives latitude to one party to deal with subject matter. I agree. I often see the language that you're talking about, Ken. But the reason why I raise that, the only reason I raise that is that we may run across something as we go forward we feel is crucial to be addressed and we might want to move forward with.
So I would suggest, Ken Plum again, I would suggest, David, that we just put just one line in there, say that this contract could be amended to upon the mutual agreement of both parties. And that should take care, that gives some leeway on both sides.
Okay.
Acceptable?
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, Ms. Young? Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Since the mayor didn't have her microphone on, you might want to repeat it so that it's captured what her comments were.
Sorry. You've got that it says there's 83 municipalities. There's actually 80 municipalities plus Louisville Metro.
Mr. Adams?
I just have a point of clarification. Are we actually making changes to this contract for revisions, or do we have to accept this as it is with the inconsistent or inaccuracies?
I'm not, when you say inaccuracies, you mean inaccuracies other than the ones we're trying to correct?
Correct.
So
So
you're
we're
saying
we're
that-
making those changes and then we'll give it back to them for another revision. I'm just asking for clarification.
For acceptance of the revisions that we're agreeing upon now, not further revisions, if that was your question. We're revising it now.
We're
approving
revising it
as
now.
we are revising it. I can't imagine they're going to have a problem with the revisions we're talking about.
Mr. Chairman, it might be subject to technical changes, might be in order.
Okay.
Yeah,
As long as
that's
it
what,
doesn't change the substance
that's
of the
it.
piece.
David, this is Ken Fleming again. David, I don't think Paul will have any issues or problems with this thing. So I think you talked to him, didn't you, about some of these changes?
I sent them to him, and he didn't say he had any problems with it.
Okay. That's what I thought. Just want to verify.
Let me just point out, it's pretty common to put the provision in there subject to technical changes because it doesn't change the substance of what you're trying to do. It just makes sure you have correct language. That's all it does.
Okay, so we've got two, what I'll call wiggle phrases in here. One about can be amended with mutual agreement, and then the subject, so we're going to approve it as amended, as revised here, subject to technical changes.
I make that motion, Mr. Chair. David
Second.
Davis.
Ken Fleming, second.
I just had one more question, Mr. President. You talked about county police. Are you talking about sheriffs?
I'm sorry.
No.
Repeat the question.
No, that should have been struck.
Okay. I don't know which one that was on.
Okay, Mr. Nemens?
Two quick comments that do not require revision to the contract. Just wanted to point out, if the gentlemen that are doing this, Mr. Coombs et al., only read this document, I wanted to note that we have not listed all the police departments. Meadowville has one, for example, so
Correct.
it doesn't need to be revised because it says like these, and so I
Like
just want to make
these,
sure they know it's not
I'm
exhaustive.
not saying those are the only ones.
Yeah, it's not exhaustive. And then the other point I want to make is on page 3, it's the last sentence on police. It says, however, we will need to account for the fact that Metro government police are supporting suburban city on a daily basis. 2 points to that. Number one, we pay for it also, so LMPD is paid for by us as well as everyone else. And number two, suburban police also assist LMPD, both inside the particular jurisdiction and outside the jurisdiction.
That's correct.
So just want to make sure that goes both ways. And that's all I have. I support the motion.
Any further? Mr. Arthur?
Go ahead. I just, on Representative Neiman's question then, does that need to be stated or just, I don't want to assume anything.
We will make sure it's in the data.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I think we're ready to vote.
I hate to pull us back, I'm
No,
sorry.
please, go ahead.
And please argue if you got an issue with this. I'm looking at page 5, deliverables, timeline, team, budget, specifically around going from parcel level data to larger geographies. It lists urban service districts, suburban cities, unincorporated areas, metro council districts, zip codes. I would like to make sure the data can be manipulated to also reflect neighborhoods and housing market areas. The housing market areas come from several planning documents that Louisville Metro government has that includes information and considers geographic and socioeconomic characteristics, planning, census tracts. All of that information is included in our 2019 housing needs assessment, and I want to make sure we can manipulate the data to be reflective of those market areas because it reflects some of our planning.
Yeah, this is Ken Fleming. Councilman, that's an inherent understanding because the data that they will use is a GIS system, and it has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of levels of data that they can extract and pull and cross-reference. So basically anything you can probably think of, it should be, I feel confidently it will be in there.
Well, okay, so can you, Mr. Arthur, can you point to specifically in the agreement where you want that language put?
I just wanted to make sure that these other two variables were explicitly listed.
Yes.
And I know it can be manipulated. I just wanted to make sure that it was automated. So after it says zip codes, comma,
Yep.
neighborhoods, and housing market areas.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, this is Jason Nemus, there may be others, so I wonder if we can amend that sentence to say, including but not limited to, and then say urban services district, so forth and so on, including what Councilman Arthur has just noted.
Okay.
That makes sense.
So with those changes, and we have already a motion and second to approve, with these further changes now, unless somebody objects, we'll assume that the motion and the second still applies. On that basis, then, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Well, we've gone through the agenda. I've got nothing else. I don't think we've got a meeting specifically scheduled, but the next one would be, I guess, December the 11th. Anybody have any concerns about a date in December or the Friday of that? It's a Sunday. Yeah, we need to back up.
What date is that?
That would make it then the 9th of December.
Oh, okay. I won't be here, but that's okay.
Hope you're going to be someplace nice.
14th. I believe Jason calls that to happen.
This is Ken Fleming. I won't be here on the 9th either.
Anybody else be absent on the 9th?
I won't be here the 16th. So, 16th. No.
I mean, I can remote in on the 9th.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So then we're adjourned then until December the 9th. Yeah, I think that, thank you very much. That's a very good point. I would assume if we're going to be meeting on the 9th of December, between now and then, the committees need to get together to organize themselves, basically, and to decide who among you wants to be coordinator, and then what your meeting schedule will be, and how you're going to conduct it between now and the 9th. Presumably, I don't know whether you'll be in a position to have any output by the night. That would be great. But hopefully, at least things will move to the point where you're at least have a rhythm and some idea of what you're going to be focusing on.
Mr. Chairman, would you mind just send out the list of who's on which committee, just for clarification? And I think you've sent the information on a contact, so if you just make sure I'm clear on who's on what committee.
Will do.
And Mr. Chairman, can we agree that notification of all committee meetings will be shared by all members as well as virtual access?
Yes. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you all.